The bliss of the abyss, it's here now.
Hello, welcome back to the Bliss of the Abyss. I am, of course, as ever, your host, Robert Neumark Jones, and you are listening to this show using your ears, your eyes, your nose, your fingertips, everything that you can. Today's show is with Joshua Shea, and he is an addiction expert in pornography, betrayal trauma, alcoholism. He's a therapeutic disclosure specialist. He is the author of 4 books about pornography. And since 2018, he's been giving interviews all around the world. He's given a TEDx talk. He's basically seeking to help people with their problems before it's too late, working through trauma with partners of addicts. And before this, he had a completely different life, a 24-year addiction to pornography that was hidden the whole time beneath being a magazine publisher, an award-winning journalist, a film festival founder, and even a local politician in Maine, which is where he still lives with his wife and 2 children. Currently 4 dogs and 7 cats, which apparently is ever-changing. And you can find everything at paddictrecovery.com. And I'll put all the links in the show notes to this episode as well. This was a fascinating talk. Whether or not you yourself are wrestling with the demons of addiction and recovery, I still think you'll find this elusive and illustrative. And if you're not, then well done, more power to you. If you are wrestling with those demons, there is a lot of help out there. And I know for a fact that you can reach out for an initial, no obligation, 30 to 60 minute session with Joshua. Just go to his website. He's a lovely guy, as you'll hear from this chat. But anyway, enough babble from me. And let me instead introduce to you my chat with the wonderful Joshua Shea. Joshua Shea, welcome to the Bliss of the Abyss, all the way from across the Atlantic. How are you doing?
I am having a wonderful snowy morning. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm not having a snowy morning, but I am frozen stiff. That's because I'm a wuss, unlike you, hardened man of the north. If it drops anywhere close to freezing, I am wearing cashmere and I'm under 4 layers of clothing. Unlike you, you're just wearing a t-shirt. Look at you, very hard.
Wearing a t-shirt. I've got no socks on. I'm perfectly fine.
Very, very strong. Well, look, thanks for agreeing to come on the show and beat the storm. I promise we'll have you out in good time. For those who are not acquainted with your work, do you want to give a little introduction to who you are and how you've come to be on the show and what we're going to talk about today?
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Joshua Shea. My origin story is pretty simple. I started to use pornography at 12 years old. I developed an addiction the first time I started watching at 12. At 14, I took up alcohol. So I was an alcoholic and a pornography addict for 22 and 24 years, respectively. And I quit using around 36, 37 years old. That brings us back. I'm now sober 8 years. When I got into early recovery, I recognized that there was no materials out there for pornography addiction. You had some things written by wives of porn addicts, and you had the studies that are out there, but for most people, reading those studies is like reading Shakespeare. It's kind of English, but it's kind of not. Mm-hmm. And I decided that with my history as a journalist, with my history as a researcher, that I could perhaps bring something to this space. So I wrote my first book. It got a wonderful response, and I've been doing this stuff ever since, as far as education, writing about it, appearing on shows like yours, doing talks in libraries, colleges, that kind of stuff. And then 2 years ago, or 3 years ago now, when the pandemic started, I realized if I was going to continue to stay in this space and make a living, I moved into the coaching area. So I now also coach both pornography addicts and their partners who are suffering from betrayal trauma. I'm certified in both areas. And this is kind of my life. I go around and I talk about pornography addiction and its effects, and hopefully, create some good in this world where maybe I wasn't doing that in the past when I was an actual addict.
Right. Yeah. 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 Wow. It must be a very different day to day from managing two addictions to keeping them. I mean, they're still kind of the center of your world, but you're in charge of them rather than them being in charge of you. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely. And I think that in some ways, this may be just a super extended version of recovery.
Mm.
I think that, I stopped doing 12-step groups several years back because where I live, they just didn't have much to offer. It's very rural. And I think that coming on shows like yours, and I think that, making these appearances and talking about this is part of my recovery. And I've just been lucky enough to figure a way to fold it into my profession. And I love what I'm doing. And, I spent years as a journalist, years as an editor, years as a magazine publisher, but this is what it feels like I'm supposed to be doing, even if I'm only making a fraction of what I was making money-wise back 10, 12 years ago. This feels, in my soul what I'm supposed to be doing.
Oh, right. Okay. And whereas before in your previous life, even if you were perhaps it was more lucrative, did it feel in your soul like it was the wrong thing then? Were you very aware that you were sort of transgressing your own morals every day, every act?
I knew I wasn't healthy. I mean, put it that way. I knew something was going to catch up with me sooner or later. I was one of these people who hid my addictions by overachieving. Like I said, I was the publisher of a magazine company where we produced 3 or 4 titles here in the Northeast. And I was also on my local city council, so I was a politician. I was also one of the founders of a very large film festival that went on for several years here in the Northeast. So I was always busy. That's the way that I kind of hid my problems, is that I was a massive overachiever. And, if you would have told me 10 years ago, you're going to make a living by sitting at home and talking to people one-on-one over the computer, I'd be like, well, no, I have to communicate to thousands. I'm a very important person. People need to hear what I have to say. And it took recovery for me to recognize that all of that adulation I was looking for from other people was part of filling the hole that was in me from, trauma that I'd never dealt with when I was a kid. And that's really the story when it comes to addiction, whether you're talking about drugs, alcohol, gambling, food, sex, porn, it doesn't matter. Most of us are trying to fill a hole that's inside of us that we may not even realize is there until we start to address it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. That's definitely been my experience of addiction, both from a personal point of view, but more from a family point of view. My mother-in-law passed away during the pandemic from alcohol addiction. She'd been an addict for a long, long time, in and out of recovery, cycles of abuse, and terrible situation that she went through, and never managed to find a way out the way that you have. So for people out there who are listening to this, who might be in that spiral and trying to find a way out, what would you say is the broadest way that you can offer them a way? And obviously they will talk, one-to-one, and you offer coaching, and I will link and promote all of your coaching. But what's the way that you can get through that noise in their head and reach out to them, do you think?
I think the most important thing is to find somebody who has made it through, whether you go to a 12-step group or you find somebody online in a forum, whether you go to, some kind of self-help, maybe it's a SMART recovery group, whatever it is, find somebody who is in recovery and who is further along than you, and forget the medical side of things for a minute, just the personal side. If you can talk to somebody who can give you some hope, I think that's the most important thing. When we all start recovery, we don't know how we're going to live our lives without our behavior or our drug of choice. I started with porn when I was 12. I started with alcohol when I was 14. It didn't matter whether I was in school or in university. It didn't matter whether I was dating somebody or I was married. It didn't matter if my kids had been born yet. It didn't matter what happened in my life for 20, 24 years, because I always had my two friends, alcohol and porn. And then when you get into recovery and you're basically told, well, we're going to make you feel better by taking away the two things that have always made you feel better. It's like, well, that doesn't make it 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2 in this formula. That doesn't make any sense. I need the alcohol. I need the porn. Well, it turns out you don't. And I can say, having worked with a lot of people, having seen a lot of people through my times in groups, through my times in rehabs, it actually does work, and it's mind-blowing that it works, but you almost need somebody who's going through it, who's been through it, to be by your side, to answer questions, to tell you, yes, you can do it, and to perhaps most importantly, not be somebody who judges you. Right. I always make the joke, when I went in first to rehab for alcoholism in 2014. And I say, people, okay, Josh, you get in there. Good job. You're a hero. Go tackle this. Let me shake your hand. You go take care of your alcohol problem. And then a year later, I go into rehab for porn addiction, and people are not wanting to shake my hand. People are wanting to find the hand sanitizer. Like, okay. Well, you need to find those people who won't judge you. If you have a safe space, if you have people who are willing to listen to you, if you have people you feel that you can be vulnerable around, I think that's really the first step to getting there.
Right. Yeah. I think that makes eminent sense to me. Yeah. We're a social species, aren't we? No one is an island. And
absolutely,
I'd be really interested to hear I know you've got some statistics and facts, because it feels like the way that society is going, you mentioned the pandemic, we all had to adapt, and a lot of people went to remote, and, we're talking remotely. So there are massive advantages to it, but it also feels like it might have accelerated some of that atomization that is happening in society. And I feel like maybe some of that loneliness and isolation does contribute towards these negative behaviors, and not having a buddy around you, or even online or wherever, is only going to make these things worse. Is that trends that we're seeing, or is that just a sort of feeling that I have?
No, you're absolutely correct. And we can really, when we look at the pornography explosion when it comes to addiction, you can date it right back to the advent of high-speed internet. When I first got on the internet, I was a porn addict because of magazines, because of videotapes. When you first got on the internet, you'd have to sit there for 6 or 7 minutes to download one photo. Yeah. It didn't make any sense. Once we had high-speed internet, that's when you saw an explosion, because I think what happened was we had never seen a technology like this before. We did not know, how to handle it. We're still in the Wild West years of the internet.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, everybody has a smartphone, and everybody gives their 10-year-old kid a smartphone. And now that 10-year-old kid has the greatest porn computer that's ever been created in the history of man. And we've got all of these companies around the globe churning out pornography. There's, I always tell people, if you're paying for pornography, you're doing it wrong, because there's on some of the major sites, you could literally watch pornography for free right now, 24/7 until the day you die, and still not see half of what they have to offer. Right. And that's ultimately, where this all went crazy, was first when we started to have high-speed internet. And then, like you said, the pandemic was a very big deal, but not necessarily in a big deal like you think. What I believe the lasting legacy of the pandemic is going to be is not in those people who found the pornography online. They already knew it was there. They just had more opportunity to watch it. What we saw explode during the pandemic was the people who were creating pornography. If you look at these different types of webcams,
like the OnlyFans crew.
Here's a statistic for you. On January 1st, 2020, which was just about when the pandemic was starting to hit over in Europe, hadn't quite hit the US just yet, January 1st, 2020, there was roughly 300,000 people making content on OnlyFans. 2 years later, January 1st, 2022, the CEO of OnlyFans said that they had over 2 million content creators. So we added 1.7 million porn stars to the world just with this one website. This doesn't count all of the cam websites. This doesn't count all of the OnlyFans knockoffs that are out there. We are talking millions of people went from having other jobs or were underage and then came of age who decided that instead of getting a normal job, instead of getting, a job at McDonald's or a job working at the mall selling clothes, they would go online and sell their bodies essentially. And I wrote a book during the pandemic called Porn in the Pandemic, how 3 months in 2020 changed everything. How basically I show that in 3 months, about 5 years worth of what would have happened in non-pandemic times went through the porn world. And I interviewed a lot of people who were kind of forced into the world of creating pornography because they lost their jobs, they were furloughed. And I'm not gonna, slam anybody who has to, make ends meet or keep a roof over their head.
Right. Bless you.
We will cut that out. Okay. So I have nothing against those people, but what scared me was in the beginning when I interviewed them, when I first started my research, they're like, yes, I'm here for the money. I'm going to keep it, very classy. I'm going to keep it, very above brow. I don't want anybody who knows me, finding out about this. I just need to make some money. 3-4 months later, when I interviewed them, I had a very different story from some of them. Some of them were telling me, there were still some who were in for it for the money, but a lot of them were telling me, before this, I couldn't get a date. And now I've got men from all over the world spending big money watching me do sexy stuff. Or I've got women from all over the world who are offering me their hand in marriage because they're lonely and they want to be with me and they think I'm something special. Nobody in real life thinks I'm something special, but when I get onto OnlyFans or when I get onto the cam site, people think that I'm special. People think that I'm wonderful. And you listen to these people, and what you're hearing is not that they're there for the commerce anymore. They're there for the love. They're there for the high. They're there for the dopamine hit.
Yeah.
And that's what I really think that in the long run, I think that the pandemic is going to be remembered as the time where we learned not about porn addiction from the consumer's side, but about porn addiction from the producer's side. Because talking to a lot of these people who actually make this pornography, they are addicted to doing this stuff. They are addicted to the attention. They are addicted to the love. And yeah, it's great money, but that's not why they're there anymore. They found a lot of other things that hit them at a soul level that I don't think in the long run is going to be healthy for them. And I can see these people 20 years from now, being 45 years old, 50 years old, still on these sites, not even caring about the money, just trying to get that attention from people because that's a fix that they never had before. And sadly, we need to talk more about this because isn't porn addiction, whether you're producing or consuming, isn't it just opposite sides of the same coin?
It's a very interesting question. It does echo something that you said earlier about when you were in your previous life about, working really hard and making loads of money, but kind of filling a hole and just fueling the addiction. And it kind of eerily seems to echo what these people might be doing now with this.
Absolutely.
And,
right.
Spinning in that spiral, but where does it end up? And is there a way out of it if you go in that deep? I don't know. I mean, I would hope so, obviously, because it seems like a lot of people probably just dipped their toe in because they thought maybe it was an easy buck or they were forced. There were definitely cases of people who were forced either through their own circumstances or from more nefarious people. But I guess to play devil's advocate, is there a way to do this healthily and sustain it long term, or do you feel like it's inevitably a model that has to eat itself?
No, I don't think so. And the reason is because when you look at addiction, I can't have beer, but I recognize that there are people who can go to the pub and have one or two beers and then go home and then not drink again for a week or 2 weeks or whatever. Not a big deal.
Mhm.
There are people who can drink in a healthy way. And I guess I shouldn't say healthy. I guess what I should say is there are people who can drink in a not unhealthy way.
Right.
I can go to a local casino and I can lose $40. I can win $40. And then I walk away, whatever, but I can see people who are gambling addicts there who are losing their houses, losing their kids' college funds.
Yeah.
I think that it's just whatever happened to hit us at that moment when we had some trauma, when we were going through something. That's kind of where we head towards when it comes to addiction. And yeah, I'm sure that there are plenty of people who can look at pornography, who can self-pleasure, who can treat it as a recreational activity, but they're not bound to it the way that somebody who is an addict like I was is bound to it. I think that they can do it in a not unhealthy way. It's just that I'm not one of those types, much like I'm not the type that can also have one beer. That's not my makeup.
Yeah, and it's one of those kind of categories, I suppose, a bit like food. I think of it in the same way it's societally given a green light because it's everywhere. Even if porn has more of a pull about it because there's, all those kind of judgments, and you hear stories of porn stars struggling to get a loan or a mortgage or whatever because, although everybody's watching it, we don't want to admit it.
Yes.
But it's everywhere, and the same with food or with alcohol or casinos in certain places as well, as opposed to sort of illegal drugs where you get into a different world. And you sort of have to, if it's everywhere, you sort of have to have this Herculean self-control of being focused on whatever your recovery looks like, whether it be 12-step, community or whatever it might be. Yeah, that's really interesting. You said you offer coaching. How many people who come to you looking for help are curious, or is it people who are hitting a rock bottom who reach out to you?
It's mostly people who just before they're hitting what they fear will be a rock bottom is what it mostly is. People who are like, okay, I've tried to stop this on my own. I can't. This is starting to cause problems in my life. With most of the time, it's causing problems with a wife or a husband or a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Or they're just recognizing, especially in the case of a lot of men, that they're starting to have erectile dysfunction issues, or they're starting to view other people almost through the lens of pornography, and people aren't people. People are objects for their sexual gratification, or some combination of all of these things. Really, there are about 11 different symptoms when it comes to pornography addiction. And I think as long as you have 3 or 4 of them, you can consider yourself an addict. And the people who come to me have generally those symptoms, and they want to do something before those symptoms become 6 or 7, or before they start to alienate and end up getting divorced and end up with a life that's of a lower quality than they have. They can see it on the horizon. They can see it coming just the same way that I could. I didn't know if it was the pornography that was going to get me or if it was the alcohol, but I could recognize years before everything came to a head that I had to do something. Unfortunately, I didn't. I ended up getting fired from my job because the other 2 owners of the company, where there was 3 of us, they fired me, even though I ran the day-to-day operations. They fired me, and that was my rock bottom. And a lot of these people see that rock bottom heading towards them. Those are the addicts. The other side of the people who I deal with are the betrayal trauma people. Those are usually females who have come to find that their husband or their boyfriend is a porn addict, that they have been using it for years, that they've been hiding it from them. And that does quite a number on their psyche. They start to want, well, if he's lied about this, what else has he lied about? Or, okay, well, why is he using porn? Am I not enough in bed? Am I not pretty enough? Am I not good enough for him? All of these problems that start to affect the partner, I deal with them as well. So it's across the board, but it's mostly people who recognize that a reckoning is about to come if they don't take care of this problem in a hurry.
That's really interesting. Yeah. because I think probably from the general like perspective, you would. It's kind of almost mocked. I remember the thing that happened during the pandemic. Was it Jeffrey Toobin? Do you know what the story I'm referring
Yes, from CNN. Yes.
CNN, who was caught masturbating on a Zoom call because he thought he'd ended the call, but he clearly hadn't. And you know I mean, we're both smiling now because the reaction it is inherently comic, but for all we know, he might have been dealing with some very serious
Absolutely
addiction.
Absolutely.
I think it makes dealing with it harder in much the same way with alcohol. The sort of glamorizing of alcohol as this, either as, you know, this kind of sexy thing or this kind of rock and roll thing, makes dealing with it, that's its own set of challenges as well. And when the two combine, it must just be a tinderbox.
And so many people are doing it these days. Prior to the internet, roughly a quarter of men looked at pornography regularly, and less than 10% of women looked at pornography regularly. There were some stats recently that said that of men who use the internet, 91.5% look at porn at least once a month. Of women who use the internet, 60.2% look at pornography at least once a month. So it's, you know, people think we still talk about this like it's the olden days of porn, and I don't do this, I don't do this, I don't do this. Well, the fact is, almost everybody is doing this now. If you are not doing this, you are in a vast minority of people. Yeah. You look at statistics of people who are married. 90% of married men use pornography at least once a month. 75% of married women use pornography at least once a month. This is something that people are doing, and we need to stop pretending that, oh my God, this is gross and we're so puritanical, and oh, I don't look at naked people doing naked things. That's not natural. And no, it is natural. It's part of our sexuality. Curiosity is okay, but this is like saying, here, do you want to try a cigarette? You try one cigarette, that's not going to kill you. You try enough cigarettes, it can kill you. Unfortunately, we teach people this with cigarettes. We teach people this with alcohol. We're not yet teaching people this kind of stuff with pornography. It's out there. There is, you know, better ways to view it than not. But we're not even telling people about the potential dangers of it. And we need to start doing that in our society. You know, it sucks that in 2022, 2023, we have to start talking about pornography as something that is a danger in our society. But, you know, back in the 1950s, my dad tells stories of hiding under desks when he was a school kid because of nuclear bombs that were going to hit. Right. Because desks would save you. Yeah. You know, it's just a different time, and we need to start as a society dealing with this, talking about the fallout, because if the statistics of young people using are correct, or even if they're even close to correct, we're going to need to start doing something very soon, because high-speed internet is changing the way that people act sexually, and it's not in a healthy way.
And how true are, I mean, you would know probably more because I've only heard from sort of a generally consuming these things point of view, you know, looking at headlines or statistics. How true are those, how real are those problems of, for example, younger people having massively increased amount of erectile dysfunction or sperm count massively decreasing, or, you know, things like this? Is this a silent epidemic?
Absolutely. Put it this way. When I was 20 years old and using pornography, the rate of erectile dysfunction among men my age when I was 20 was 2 to 4%. You look at men who are 20 years old right now, their average of experiencing erectile dysfunction, 22 to 25%.
Okay, an order of magnitude bigger. Wow.
Yeah, that's ridiculous how high it's gone up.
Yeah.
So is it anything else other than pornography? I can't imagine that it is. If you trace when we got high-speed internet, if you trace how people started using, this is exactly it. We now understand things like the mind doesn't always know whether it's looking at a screen or whether it's looking at something that is in real life.
Yeah.
We also know through a phenomenon known as the Coolidge effect that animals get bored with repeated viewings of the same sexual material again and again. So if your mind can't tell the difference between your girlfriend or your boyfriend standing in front of you naked and somebody on a screen, yeah, after a while, if you've been with somebody for years, you've seen them naked hundreds of times, if not thousands of times. You've had sex with them hundreds of times, if not thousands of times. You know how that movie ends.
Right.
But the thing is, with pornography, there's always something new out there. So your mind tends to move towards pornography and something new. And that's why we hear all of these. It's not just erectile dysfunction while looking at porn. Most of the erectile dysfunction is happening in real life while people are with their partners. They're fine with pornography. I had a couple not too long ago who he was fine in the bedroom if pornography was playing on the television set, or if they had a laptop computer open and pornography was on. He could get hard. He could finish. You shut down that laptop, you turn off the TV, he couldn't even maintain an erection because he needed that pornography playing everywhere. And that's what I think that's one of the things that I think you start to tell 11 and 12-year-old boys about this. I think you're going to see a big drop in pornography statistics because 11 and 12-year-old boys don't want to be porn addicts. But that's when the seeds of pornography addiction start to be planted. The average kid now sees pornography for the first time at 11 years old. And by 13, 14, there's a large percentage, especially of young males, who are watching every day. I don't think that they want to be porn addicts. I think most of them probably want girlfriends or boyfriends. Yeah. They want to be with somebody. They want to, experience it for real. But since they can't, they have pornography. Well, we need to educate them about the problem with pornography.
Right, exactly. Instead of sort of stigmatizing it, turning it into a taboo, being like, let's just put our fingers in our ears and go la 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 and hope that it all works out. Because obviously,
absolutely,
those statistics are no joke. That's a trend that is a lot of the time. I think with stuff like this is I kind of think of it as the same way as a lot of technology, a lot of food. It's like it's advanced far faster than evolution can handle. We're not equipped to deal with a Domino's pizza. That would never happen in the wild. So of course your brain and your body is like, it has everything I could possibly quick eat it all. And it's just the same with sort of some of these very stimulating high-speed internet HD, so real that it feels like you're there. And now we're putting on goggles and haptic feedback and starting to experience this thing. And it's all trending in that direction. I think probably a lot of people probably think maybe there's some technological bullet that we can fix this problem with. Do you think it's going to go that way, or do you think it's more going to be going back to what we talked about before, tribal basics, human contact, community?
Yeah. I think that's it. I think that we are now, once people recognize that the be careful of porn speech for your kids is not the birds and the bees speech, that we'll be a little bit better off. That's what I think a lot of people are afraid of is, it's sex. It involves naked people doing naked people things. Why? What am I supposed to do? How do I talk to my kids about this? Well, you know what? You don't have to talk about sex. You and I have been talking now for 40 minutes. We have not got into explicit areas once, and we're not going to, because you can talk about pornography without getting explicit. You can make things very, very age appropriate for kids. You can tell a 5 or 6 year old kid, hey, you don't ever let anybody take a picture of you without your clothes on, and you don't ever take a picture of anybody without their clothes on, and leave it at that. And then in a year or two, you can be, hey, when you're in school, you may have a friend who has a tablet or a phone, and they may have naked people on it, people without their clothes on. If you see that, make sure you tell a teacher, or when you come home that night, tell me about it, because we need to keep you safe. The be careful of pornography speech, it's just like the be careful of smoking speech. It's the be careful of drinking speech. When you're 18 years old and you leave the house, you can decide if you want to use this stuff. But while you live here, we don't use pornography in our house.
Mm.
Those kinds of simple speeches have such a big impact on people. And I think that if we can get parents to start recognizing it's important to make that kind of speech, we'll be so much better off.
Yeah, and a lot of the time, all kids actually want is a reason. So if something is just outright banned, if it's like, because I said so, NO spells no, that doesn't satisfy anyone. You just sort of think, hold on, there must be a reason other than just no. And then you start to do your own research, and before you do it, you're finding some terrible.
And it turns out naked people are fun to look at. Naked people are interesting to look at. Watching people have sex is interesting. Watching people have sex is exciting. It does things to your body, and it makes you want to do things to your own body. Yeah. That's all completely natural. That's all completely okay. Sexuality is a wonderful, beautiful thing. I tell people I am not anti-pornography. That would, trying to ban pornography is like trying to ban drinking. And we saw what happened in the U.S. 100 years ago when they tried that folly. I don't think we're never going to ban pornography because it's completely natural and it's completely understandable to be curious about sexuality, to be interested in seeing depictions of sexuality. But we need to understand that it also comes with a very dark side that a lot of people, as it turns out, are susceptible to.
Yeah, like so many things. It's a really good point. Yeah. Moderation in regards to all things is probably a pretty good mantra to live by.
Some of us can't moderate. Like I said, with my drinking, I can't have one pint. I wish I could, but I can't.
How soon after having your first drink did you realize that you couldn't just have one? Because presumably the first time you had one, you just had one and it made you feel weird. And
Yeah, it was the first time I ever got drunk. I was one of these guys who the first time I used porn recognized I was an addict or recognized that I had found something very special. Probably didn't think about addiction for a long, long time. First time I ever got drunk when I was 14 years old. Oh my goodness, I get why people do this now. This feels great. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, those were my two passengers with me the rest of my life until I was 37 years old and first got help for the alcoholism, is that these were the two things I could count on to always make me feel better, no matter who was in my life, no matter what was going on. These were the things that I knew they were not healthy for me, but when stuff's going bad, you go to what you know, and there are my two crutches right there, one under each arm. Right. And it's like I said, in the recovery process, they're basically telling you, well, we're going to kick out your crutches and you're going to learn to walk. And it's like, well, I can't do that. But in reality, you absolutely can.
Yeah. What I find so interesting about addiction in that way is that it manages to tell a story inside your head that doesn't actually comport with reality. Like I have very intimate knowledge of alcohol addiction, of it's my friend, I'll go to it and it will give me pleasure. And the reality is the idea of it might provide you with comfort. The idea it's your friend, but almost as soon as you start drinking, it's not helping you. It's turning you inside out. It's making you angry. It's making you depressed. However it affects you, it affects lots of people, lots of different ways. But it very rarely is like, and now I'm chill. It just doesn't have that effect, but it sings to you. It's that siren song that tells you that that's what it will do, and then it doesn't.
Absolutely. And it's one of these things where it's like it comes with promises of relief. You have relief from stress, relief from anxiety, relief from all the bad things in the world. You go open this can of worms and ultimately it doesn't make you feel better, but it did once, and that's what you chase. That's what you keep chasing. People are like, addicts are always looking for the next big high. And I said, we're never looking for the next big high. We're looking for the same old high. That's the problem. That's why things escalate. That's why things get worse and worse, because your body gets used to it and you have to drink more. I got to the point where I couldn't drink beer anymore. I wouldn't get drunk off of beer. I had to move on to the harder stuff that I thought tasted terrible because I needed that feeling. I needed those, chemicals coming from my mind to make me feel better, and beer couldn't do it anymore. I had to escalate. And it's the same thing with pornography. people who watch 15, 20 minutes, suddenly, a few years later, I hear from them all the time where it's like, I sit down to look at porn and 2 hours is gone. And I'm still not done because I'm looking for the perfect piece of porn to finish with.
Oh my God.
It escalates and it escalates and it escalates.
Wow. Yeah, I suppose was it the Coolidge effect that you mentioned? That's
Yeah.
a sort of that hunt for novelty can just be
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Jesus, hours and hours of just chasing. And what's it all for? The crazy thing with that, of course, is once it's over, it's not like that was really worth the 3-hour journey.
No, that's when the shame comes. That's when the embarrassment comes. That's when the, judging yourself comes and feeling worthless and making promises to yourself that you won't be able to keep next time. A lot of self-loathing involved with it. There's nothing good about it, but your brain tells you need those chemicals, even if it's just for a couple seconds, that quick fix.
Yeah. Hey, I'm curious. This might be a bit of a strange question, so feel free to just bat it back at me. But you must be familiar with the concept of a dry drunk.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for those people out there who don't know what that is, there's someone who isn't drinking anymore, but hasn't actually dealt with the problems of alcoholism and is still displaying those behaviors and still in that addiction cycle, even though they're managing to resist alcohol in that moment. Is there such a thing as that with pornography, almost like a dry addict with porn?
Yeah, absolutely. You can white knuckle anything. You can white knuckle anything, but if you don't go back and deal with the ultimate problem of the of Jesus Christ, how could trauma? Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. If you don't go back and recognize the problem with the trauma, you're never going to take care of it. And I describe it very simply as, imagine you have a giant cut in your arm. And the first thing you do is you take a bandage and you wrap it all up. Well, a bandage doesn't actually heal anything. A bandage doesn't actually help anything. Now, imagine that big cut is your trauma, and then you've wrapped the bandage. That bandage is your addiction. The addiction may hide the trauma. The addiction may hide the cut, but it doesn't actually help it at all. What you have to do, if you're going to heal that cut, you have to take that bandage off and you have to clean out that cut. You have to address that cut. What needs to be done to heal this? You can't just hide it with that bandage. And unfortunately, people try to hide things with their addiction for so long. Those people who are white knuckling it, maybe they take that bandage off, but they're still sitting there with an arm full of infection, with an arm that's fully still cut. You need to deal with the deeper stuff. And I know it sucks. I had to go through it myself. It's not a fun process dealing with trauma, especially if you've got any sexual or physical abuse in your past that created part of that trauma. You've got to go back and relive that stuff. And it is horrible. It is not fun. It is saddening and maddening and frustrating, and you feel for the person that you were when you were younger. And it's such a grueling process to go through trauma and to sort it out. But the other side of it, that's what everybody thinks doesn't exist. That other side is wonderful. I can tell you now in my mid-40s, I am so much healthier spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally than I ever was in my mid-30s when I was still drinking and still using pornography every day.
Wow. Yeah, that's really impactful. I think that's right. And that's why people have that aversion to it, because it's the hard work. And it's why people want the magic bullet, the pharmaceutical intervention that's going to magically make stuff go away. But that just is not how life works. Just in the same way that addiction isn't just actually a relief when you tickle the itch. It's not. It's the same thing. That's really, really fascinating. So when people come to you for help with their addictions, how long is the program typically? How long?
It depends who they are. It depends how seriously they take it. It depends what level they're at when it comes to addiction. I've got people who come to me who are low-level addicts who, recognize that they're developing a problem, and it's easier for them to take care of it than somebody who is, right on the edge of that abyss of rock bottom, of falling into it and not coming back. It takes them a bit longer. It also is, how willing are you to deal with the trauma? How willing are you to start talking about some of these difficult things? Because it's not that difficult to get you to drop your porn use 50, 60, even 70% within a week or two. It's really not that difficult. What's more difficult is getting to the root of why were you doing this in the first place, because it changes over time. When I was 12, 13 years old, the reason that I started drinking, the reason that I started using porn, it's not the reason that I was using at 25 or using at 35. I got through that trauma. And I think what happens, and this is not scientific whatsoever, it's just my theory. I think what happens is that we get through this horrible trauma, or I should say we believe we get through this horrible trauma. We just kind of put it on a shelf for later usage. And we go back to our regular life. And then we find out, a bad day can be made better by your addiction. Because early on, it still makes you feel good. Early on, when I was 15, 16 years old, 3 beers felt better to me than 20 years later when I'd have half a bottle of tequila. Those 3 beers made me feel like I was on top of the world. And that's kind of the escalation, where it starts and where it moves, is you just keep going down this path and going down this path. And where it feels good early on, well, now I'm having a perfectly good day, but I still need to use. I'm having a great day, but I still need to use, because it just becomes part of the routine.
Yeah, and obviously one of the associated problems with, I don't know about as much with porn, but with alcohol, is that it's associated with both sad and happy times. So something goes wrong, have a drink, it'll make it better. Yeah. Something goes right, celebrate, have a drink. And so it becomes enmeshed in every part of your life, and picking it out becomes that much trickier. And I suppose it's the same theory of when you're younger and your brain is developing, if it's getting its hooks, not to talk about chemical hooks, because I know that's a whole other topic, but if it's getting its claws into you metaphorically early on, it can burrow that bit deeper as your psyche develops, as you grow. And that's why, like, as you were saying earlier, having those conversations earlier, understanding what's happening to you is so much more important.
Absolutely.
How fascinating. Well, thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show. If people want to reach out and find a way to talk to you for help, how would be the best way to do that?
You can reach me through my website. It's paddictrecovery.com. That's the letter P, addictrecovery.com. Or you can reach out to me on Instagram, and that is also P Addict Recovery. Probably the 2 best places to reach me.
Great. Okay. Well, brilliant. Thank you so much, Joshua. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Beat that storm.
I'm going to try. You're going to pack up, get out of this hotel room, and try to get ahead of it.
Awesome. Take care. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thanks a lot, Robert.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you've enjoyed it, please give us 5 stars and consider becoming a subscriber, and maybe even supporting us on Patreon. Really, really, really helps me continue making this show. If you haven't enjoyed it, then you can fuck off. Many, many thanks to Nils Hennis-Steer for the amazing music, and to Dave Fox for the cool artwork. Please keep coming back every week for more Bliss of the Abyss.
Message 1.